Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of wild shifts, looking at a band that typically does one sound and wildly moves to a completely different sound. We checked out Deafheaven yesterday. We're going to check out another track from them today. This one being Lament of Wasps off of the Infinite Granite album. So let's dive into this and look at a very different direction for Deafheaven. Loving all the snare work with this. There's a lot of forward momentum with this track, and the snares are really lean into that. Really interesting choice for the harmony to be so vaporous. Really interesting because it is a different style texture-wise, chords possibly harmonically, but it's still definitely Deafheaven, especially when we get to the chorus. Still got that punchy bass at the bottom. But see, this is still kind of very Wall of Soundish. We have some noisiness going on over here. It's just a brighter sound with less distortion, but it's definitely Deafheaven. To a 6-pulse with a lot of offbeat accents. Well, now everything's the first three are all on the downbeats, the second three are all on the offbeats. And even that guitar solo, it being in the spotlight, a little difficult for me to hear the individual picks. There's still a lot of distortion on there covering up the attack itself. The notes were just kind of changing. Like this guitar over here isn't really doing much, whereas this guitar is giving us a full melody, leaning into the variety that I talked about yesterday with Deafheaven's guitar writing. See, this section is still very posty, just with a lot of clean instruments. I'd even say the guitar and bass are giving us some black metal elements. Yeah, a bit of cliche there with the retardando into the resolution. The resolution wasn't a full chord, it was a slower strum across the strings so that we get each individual note. Interesting. So, like I was saying, this is still, to me, at least the choruses and even a bit of the bridge, this is still post-metal. We've just turned off the distortion on many of the instruments. And I find that fascinating. It isn't necessarily that this is a totally different style for Deafheaven. Not compositionally, anyways. And it's only sonically mildly adjacent. I mean, it's not even that huge of a departure on the composition, on the sonic side. But I can totally understand how someone would hear this and be like, this is not anything I'm used to. But it's actually really fascinating just how similar this is to what we listened to yesterday. So let's get into some of that, which is not the direction I wanted to take when I started this video. I was like, Bryan, focus on the song itself, and then we'll do compare and contrast afterwards. But I think it's really difficult to do that, especially because there's so much to compare. There's very little that I can talk about this song specifically that doesn't also relate to what we talked about yesterday. And I really wish I could remember the name of that song. Brought to the Water. That's what it was. Why didn't that thing work? Why doesn't this thing ever work? Oh, what in the... Okay, so it'll be up there, I promise. Click that link if you want to see my Brought to the Water reaction. Yeah, there's just so little that I think I could speak specifically about this track. So the whole thing's just going to kind of be a compare and contrast. So let's get into that. The song is primarily made up of, especially if we're looking at just the verses, collections of isolated licks, layers, I think we're going to go with layers on this one, that are rather spacious and feel disjointed from everything else. All of them rather bright, timbre-wise. There's a real upbeat element to both the sound of the instruments and harmonically what they're playing. Um, it's not present all throughout. There is a bit of a sadness that comes in accompanied with a weight that we'll feel in the choruses. We'll talk about that in a bit, but at least in the verses, it's predominantly, not exclusively, but predominantly a bit uplifting. There's positivity shining through everything. Um, we have a couple guitars. We have the bass. We have the drums, the vocals, and something else. I don't know if it's a synth. I don't know if it's a heavily processed second vocal. There is something that harmonizes with our lead vocalist from time to time. And it's a really interesting ethereal thing going on that feels like vapor, where you hear it, and almost as soon as you've heard it, it kind of feels like a ghost of that sound. It's quickly fading and evaporating, and you can still feel the note lingering, but it's not as easy to hear anymore. It's not as clear and concrete. Very interesting technique going on there. Now, all of these building blocks, as I said, are rather spacious. They're layering on top of each other and creating a rather dense section, but none of them are actually touching very well. There's a lot of empty space in our sound sphere. This is interesting for later, so keep that in mind. What's interesting about these layers, though, is that many of them are working conducively. They're attempting to achieve a specific vibe. We have our left guitar, just beautiful little licks or ornamental ideas, or occasionally, I think in our second verse, we had some riffs going on in there. Just really neat ideas. We have the drums a bit laid back with extra energy. I'd mentioned the snares at the beginning. We have a lot of snares in our first verse. I don't remember. I wasn't paying attention about the snare intensity throughout the second, third verse. But in the first one, certainly had a lot of drive and direction with it. And the bass is interesting because the bass carries this meaty, chunky metal sound. It is a very aggressive bass tone, which betrays everything else going on here, and honestly, it'd feel out of place if not for some of the other sections of the track. But it does a good job of filling out the low end while having some mildly interesting ideas, but primarily being foundational. It is a beautiful section. It sort of just is. And at this point, I was like, okay, this is very different for Deafheaven. We've listened to a couple tracks. They're blackened, posty stuff, lots of distortion, lots of production on our sounds, wall of sound stuff going on, heavy vocals. This is the opposite, right? Nothing's really going for a wall of sound. Everything's isolated, clean vocals, bright and poppy sound. We come out of the verse, and there's a pre-chorus in there where things kind of dip down a little bit. Sorry, a pre-chorus. And then we come into the chorus, though. And this is where things start to click. That's when I realized that this isn't an odd song for Deafheaven. It's just Deafheaven with the volume cranked down a little bit. We're not distorting as badly. Our overdrive is turned off today, but we're still Deafheaven. We have a left guitar that comes in not incredibly distorted, but distorted enough that it's difficult to hear the attacks in their playing, and really you just kind of get a wall of sound of chords. Sometimes they move, sometimes they're static. You don't really ever hear when they change, it just sort of morphs into the next sound. Kind of like, oh, what? Post metal. Huh. Well, we also have that really chunky, aggressive, post metally bass sound, too. Well, those two kind of fit together. And all of that space between all of our instruments earlier is gone. It's been filled up by this wall. Now we have a wall of distorted sound with ornamental ideas placed around it. I'm pretty sure I said those exact words yesterday. The difference, of course, is that our ornamental ideas here are very clearly heard in the production. They have clean sounds on the instruments themselves. They're purposefully separated from both the wall of sound noisy element and from the other ornamental ideas, and they are bright, kind of have a bouncy poppiness to them, again, from their timbre and their harmonic qualities, the notes that are chosen. The vocals are still sort of higher pitched, falsetto, mixed head voice, I think maybe. Very ethereal though. And what is that genre that I'm thinking of now? Um, it's not bubblegum pop. Is it synth pop? That doesn't sound right either. There's a genre of music we've listened to that utilizes these very ethereal vocals almost exclusively. Although typically it's with a female vocalist, not a male, but I don't think that really matters that much. It's just the people who, or I guess maybe the timbre that typically gets associated with it. Anyways, though, yeah, we've listened to a genre. Anyways, that's what the vocals remind me of. So there is all of this poppy stuff going on, but there's also this blackened posty thing going on underneath all of it. The way that it's all layered feels very reminiscent to yesterday, just with the distortion turned off of most of the instruments, but we still have our wall of sound foundation, and we have our ornamental ideas that sit on top of it, and our lead vocals that sit on top of that. The vocals are still obscured quite a bit, where yesterday they were obscured by the production through distortion and compression. Today they're obscured through the production of echo and reverb and maybe something else. They're very ethereal. They're difficult to grab onto, and they sort of bounce around in a way that clutters up the sound itself. The vocals almost feel like dipping your finger into a river or a pond and the ripples going out, and where once it was clear water you could see straight down, now it's kind of blurry and it's difficult to see specifics underneath the surface of the water. And that's what the vocals feel like. They're there, but they're vague, and that kind of lines up with sort of that ethereal, not fog, vapor element that I was talking about earlier. The wall of sound, though, has its own harmonic elements. It feels a bit heavy, weighty, but melancholic. That would be the harmonic part. The weight definitely comes from the production of it. It is a wall of sound, and walls of sounds tend to be heavy. They tend to put a weight on the listener. It feels like they're being crushed by the audio itself. And the song bounces back and forth between these two. The lighter, bouncier verse, and that plus a wall of sound chorus. The bridge takes us to the first time that we get to hear the guitar by itself, and it's a guitar solo, the distorted guitar. Anyways, it's a guitar solo that is sandwiched between a couple other ideas. We bounce rapidly between like these 8-bar sections, all within a similar vibe, but changing what's in the spotlight rapidly. Uh, it's a tough it's tough to get a read on specifically what this section is going for, other than rapid change within a static environment. But I enjoyed being able to hear the guitar, because it was at this point that I recognized, oh, I can't hear the attacks. This isn't just similar to black metal style production on this guitar. This is black metal production on this guitar. It's not as loud. but it's the same principles behind it. And that's when everything starts to click, that this is just black metal without the distortion on everything. And so that's pretty much where I am at the end of this track now. I really appreciate it on some levels. I think the proper term for this is probably going to be something close to black gaze. Primarily because the clean poppier sounds with the wall of sound distortion is pretty much shoegaze, but this has a bit of the darkness to it, which makes me think it might be blackened in a sense. But it's definitely in the shoegaze, black gaze area. That would be my guess for the genre. Which, as I've mentioned before, blackened metal and shoegaze have so much in common. It's really easy to cross them over, which is probably why black gaze is already a genre. I didn't have to invent it; someone else did. It's not a genre I had to coin, which is probably why this song feels so similar to what we checked out yesterday, at least for me. A casual listener who's just absorbing the emotion of it is probably going to find, like I mentioned, a drastic shift here. There's going to be a whiplash, like, whoa, whoa, this is the same band. But actively listening, paying attention to how the instruments are played, the production put on the instruments, the composition of the piece, all I see is the same song. It has a different feel, different emotion, slightly different atmosphere, but all the foundational work, like 70% of this, it's the same track. This is 100% still Deafheaven. And I find that fascinating. I wonder if that's going to be the case for the whole week. I'm up here listening to music in a drastically different way than most people do, and even drastically different than what I do casually. What I listen to casually is usually very far away from what I critique positively on the channel. I love simple mainstream stuff. That probably doesn't come as a surprise based on some of the aspects of music that I tend to praise. But I tend to talk the most about progressive, complex music. But honestly, I listen to very little of that outside of the channel. Um, where was I going with this though? Um, I don't know. Shoegaze, black gaze. I don't even know how I got on topic of my music. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I listen to music so totally different than most people would. And so I wonder if most of the songs this week are going to be, they're going to have very different feels to them. They might not be different compositionally, they might not be different on a musician level, but they're going to feel very different. Um, Either that or it's going to be something very clear cut, like a genre swap. A metal band making a pop song. I think everybody can agree that that is a wild shift. But at least to start this double week off, to start the theme off, we have two tracks that to me are fairly similar. Let's hit some lyrics. Directly from George Clark, who is, I don't know, he's one of the members of the band. Dreampop! That's the tag I was looking for. I mean, the genre I was looking for. It says it's a love song filled with direct references to insomnia. Blue represents a warm, safe feeling while making this album. Brings up blue because blue is used frequently throughout the track. Interesting, it says blue is a warm, safe feeling. Blue is not a warm color for me. When I talk about warm tone, oh, specifically, there's this, man, there's this ambient techno track we listened to a while ago. Oh, it was actually Jeep's track, wasn't it? Let me see if this works. No, of course. Man, why does that button not work? Anyways, it's up there. You can go check it out. Anyways, I mentioned that the song is very warm and felt orangey to me. That is a warm color. It's the color of copper, which is also a warm sound. Specifically, even when looking at instrumentation, a copper trumpet is going to sound warmer than a silver trumpet. I mean, it's just That's just how timbre works. So it's very interesting to me that he feels blue as a warm color. I mean, there's blue heat. I get that in nature, like physically. But visually, it's just so far away from my experience. And I think that's something awesome too um, about art is perspective, lived experience, everything that builds your person. Why did it go up there now? I don't understand. But it drastically influences things. And if I had not read that, I would have had a very different understanding of this track, because blue would have meant something very different to me than warmth and comfort. Even better, though, is the song starts out with frigid bedroom capture in a spring without desire, immediately evoking the ideas of a freezing bedroom, which to me immediately evokes the color of blue. um, Anyways, the verses are a bit odd to me until I hear the pre-chorus and chorus. So we'll start with those. We'll jump to the verse. The pre-chorus says, "I lay steady, staring at the ceiling, waking fears of nothing." So, I'm not afraid of anything. I'm not having nightmares. I just can't sleep, staring at the ceiling. He says, "You lament for wasps. You glow cobalt in the home of the friendliness." And I assume that this is the person in the bed next to them. And they sleep fine. Again, glows cobalt. Cobalt is a type of blue, and blue to him is safety. Um, so yeah, very interesting. The song is definitely about insomnia, as we see throughout both pre-choruses and even the chorus itself. Says, "Another night spent fussing, feasting like the lords, laughing at the fronting, singing to the chords of hell imagined." Which is very different imagery than I would expect given the dream pop sound of this track. But yeah, the chords of hell. That's a line that gets repeated a lot in here. So taking this, we go back to the verses. Verse 2 says, "In this perfect hour, gasping in a sleepless kneel, holding on to gleaming teal." Holding on to that blue, hoping for comfort, hoping the comfort will help you rest. Um, but nothing coming from it. And that's pretty much the whole song. The outro just repeats "Lament for Wasps, Cobalt Blue" over and over and over. It's interesting that a song about insomnia feels so dreamlike. It almost seems like, a slap in the face to the insomniac. That the song that they're singing feels so much like rest, so much like sleep. The one thing unobtainable to them is the sonic quality of the song about insomnia. It's I really like that. Otherwise though, I don't see much here that kind of fits into the music. I do like the elements of unable to grasp this, right? This person cannot obtain sleep. They cannot grasp it. They might reach for it, but it's just out of reach, or maybe it slips right through their fingers, very much like the concepts of vapor and etherealness, just a bunch of things that aren't physically graspable. You can see them, you just can't touch them. And that's what sleep is to um, our character here, especially as they look at the person in their bed and see them sleeping. It's once again visual, it is within reach, it is seeable, it's understandable, but it is not for them. And yeah, I think that whole thing combined with the dream pop sound make this really profound to listen if you take it all in, which of course is something I don't do on a first listen. I take in the music, then the lyrics, and then try to piece it all together. But I think knowing what the song is about, this can be exceptionally profound and powerful by the end of it, because there is this constant drive. I mean, even the drive in the drums in the first verse have this almost anxiety, laden concept of moving forward. Let's get past the restlessness. Let's get to the sleep. Just that uh, yeah, not I guess anxiety. We're just gonna use the word again. This stress of let's get to the next part. Let's just do it. Why am I still awake? Um, yeah, it's actually a lot more cohesive than I thought coming out of the lyrics. There's a lot of stuff in here that ties back to it thematically. Those are my thoughts on Deafheaven's Lament for Wasps. This is where y'all come in. Let me know what you thought of this track in the comment section. Above the comments in the description box, the description, in the description box is a link for Linktree. It takes you to this menu. You can find my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of them. We have a special selection coming up next. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow. We're going to start with another band, this time King Crimson, looking at something that is pretty indicative of their style. And Thursday, we'll look at something that deviates quite a bit from it. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos. I don't know why I'm doing so much of this, but have a great day, y'all.